Steve, welcome in. It is time for the Slasher U podcast, a college basketball podcast here for Slasher U. I'm your host, Christian Rao. As I said, mentioned, but here, the feckless wonder, Steve Feck. We're going to talk the Pac 12 here. We got a nice Pac 12 preview. Men's basketball for 2022 and 23 is going to be one hell of a conference. We got some good teams to talk about. And the way we're going to do that, if you haven't seen our previews in the past, is we talk about the first four. We take four teams and then a sleeper pick to round out our starting five of the conference. It's going to be a really exciting time. I'm looking forward to it. Steve, what's going on? Welcome to the Pac-12 preview.
Yeah, and the more that I dug into it, and I'm sure this happened with you too, the more excited that I am where I'm going to need to change my sleep habits. And I actually want to watch so many of these teams live. I don't want to catch it on the highlights at ESPN the next morning.
Yep.
I don't want to watch it if I DVR it or whatever. I actually want to watch some of these, five-star recruits that are coming into the conference. Some of these teams I think are going to be really interesting, and they're going to be problems come tournament time for I think the Pac-12 still kind of gets overlooked as a basketball conference, but there's always at least one Pac-12 team that does some surprises in the tournament. And I think because they're so competitive throughout the year, I think that's what makes them so good come March.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. I think that this is one of the most should be looked at conferences, especially this year. I think we have seen we see some of the teams in the AP top 25, so that's good. I think we have three of them, two of them. So some worth talking about, worth discussing, and we're going to dig into five of those teams today. And with that being said, Steve, let's go down to our first team of the night. And that's the Arizona Wildcats. That's where I want to start. You got Tommy Lloyd, who was the National Coach of the Year last year, in his first year, might I mention. I feel like that is the storyline that I want to drive right off the bat, is an amazing story of Tommy Lloyd and that coaching staff. What happens with this team in year two? They obviously lose, three players to the NBA, and they're going to have a tough time initially right off the bat, I think, trying to figure out this team, or will they? Because they do have some really fun guys on their squad as well. Arizona's ranked AP 17th. Coaches poll gave them 13. The Torvik ranking gives them that 14. And of course, KenPom, which I think is pretty interesting, has got them at number 10, the number one team in the Pac-12, according to KenPom. The rest of them usually got them about the second team in the Pac-12. We'll talk about that team here in a little bit. I'm looking forward to this Arizona Wildcats team. I think they are one of those squads that can really make some noise. I know they're not the favorite in the conference right now to a majority of people. It usually is handed over to the Bruins right now. But I think this is a squad, and you'll see this when our preseason rankings come out, at least on my side, Steve, that I think Arizona can win this conference. I think they can win this conference and do it quite well. I think that this is one of those squads that have a good opportunity at going 22, 23, 24, even maybe higher than that, games winning in this season. What's going on with Arizona?
Well, I want to go back to Tommy Lloyd real quick too. When was the last time you heard any rumblings about problems as far as recruiting or violations since he took over?
That's a very good point.
And again, I love Sean Miller. I do. I think he's a great coach. And I think going back to Xavier is going to be a big thing for him. But almost within the first month of the season last year, there was no more talk about that. Not even like in the shadows, or there weren't even whispers on broadcasts about it anymore. He brought a more up-tempo Gonzaga-like offense, to the table with Arizona. The players that he had, I think, bought into that right away, and I think they enjoyed playing that system. And the other thing with Tommy Lloyd that you have to remember, that he was the driving force behind all of the international scouting that Gonzaga was so successful with, that Mark Few used. And he brought a guy with him from Gonzaga. He has, more than half the roster are international recruits or stars. And I think that makes a huge X factor for this Arizona team, because, okay, they're younger guys. Maybe they're unproven in some people's eyes, but these guys are playing against adults in a lot of the leagues, in their countries. Estonia, Lithuania, Serbia, these young kids at 14, 15, 16, they're playing against adults in some cases, and they're always putting up good showings in international tournaments. So that gives them an advantage against even like a 5-star recruit that's in the McDonald's All-American. I think these international players that come in, I think they're just ready for the grind of a season. So I think what makes Arizona so interesting and why you see that diversity is because it's a roster steeped in international talent, and you really don't know exactly how it's going to come across. But I mean, in my book, because of what Tommy Lloyd has done on the international recruiting market, I think that makes Arizona the favorite. I think UCLA is great. I love, Oregon. We're going to talk about it later. But I think because of that talent, the more comfortable they get, they're going to just get better and better as the season goes on.
That's an underrated, I think, viewpoint about Tommy Lloyd is the fact of his international recruiting and all the work he did at Gonzaga. He was an assistant for Gonzaga for a very long time,
Mhm.
under a very well-respected coach. I mean, he worked his way up from grad assistant to top assistant, to associate head coach. I think that's what they call it on the bench. So I mean, he really did see everything, and he had a really cool conversation just this past month on another podcast where he discussed how he wants his assistants to be in the mix more because he knows how it feels or how it was to be an
Mhm.
assistant at one level, and having that that rapport with the other players and the other teams and the other coaching staff, I should say. I am really high on this squad. I think Tommy Lloyd is going to be able to overcome the fact that he lost a pretty decent part of his scoring from last season. I mean, obviously, three of his players going to the NBA. I think he can really do it, and it's going to rely on those international, like you said. I really like this. Here's my little teaser. We're gonna have this on our prediction show, but here's my teaser. I have Arizona winning the Pac-12.
Yeah, I think the scoring is going to be there. The consistency of some of the scoring might not be there in the early contests, but Adama Ball from France, from the guard spot, he's going to defend as well as he's going to produce offensively, but he can shoot the ball. They've got some big 7-footers on the inside. There's a kid Henry, I believe it's pronounced Visar from basketball obsessed Estonia. And you don't think of Estonia as an international basketball. They love basketball players there. They already have another player from Estonia on the roster, but by all accounts, he's the best player ever to come out of Estonia. And what little tape I've been able to pick up to watch, this guy's going to contribute right away. And at 7 foot, I mean, now you're talking about like the Porzingises of the world, at the NBA level that can come out, shoot a jumper, hit a three when he needs to, and still bang the boards and dominate at the rim. So Arizona is just so fun. And the player that I also like is Umar Ballo, and that's the player that I mentioned had followed Lloyd from Gonzaga to Arizona. And I was a little bit surprised at that because when that happened, I think we were all surprised at how well Arizona did last year. And that's why Lloyd was coach of the year. But that shows you the kind of relationship that he has with these kids. He's having to talk not only to kids that come into a whole brand new culture where they may
Mhm.
not know, be very fluent in the language. He has to convince these parents to say, not only, were we bringing them to another country, but now, I mean, we're asking him to basically make his life basketball, and he's not going to be able to travel back to see his family for the next 2, 3, 4 years. So it's just such an interesting dynamic with Arizona. They have enough people that have come in. They have some grad transfers. Cedric Henderson came in from Campbell, and a kid named Courtney Ramey from Texas. They're veterans. They're going to bring a little bit of stability to the backcourt. be able to calm things down if because in the Pac-12 sometimes you can get into running contests, kind
Yeah.
of calm things down and say it's okay. Let's play our system. We're going to be okay. And Arizona is going to be a problem later in the year. Will there be some loses, some losses that has us scratching our heads early? I think so. I think that's fair. When you're replacing such a big chunk of your roster after such a magical year last year, yeah, I think there's going to be some hiccups. But once we get into conference play, especially as you're playing a team a second time,
Hmm.
I think Arizona is a problem for everybody in the Pac-12.
I think right off the bat, just based off what you just said, talking about Balo, I think that he's ready for a more important role on this team, and that's going to be
Mhm.
huge. And then you mentioned him. I think that transfer from Campbell, Cedric Henderson, I think he's one of those underrated pieces that just fits Arizona and like is one of those, with the storyline that I was talking about of they are how they are missing key NBA pieces. Well, this is a guy who can come in and not only be a good guard piece, but can help on the wing and be some good wing depth. And that's something I think Arizona is going to really need. And I think Henderson fits the bill on that one. We saw him averaging 14 points per game at Campbell, and I think that he can come in and give that team an edge off the bench because I feel like he'll be one of the strongest, if not the strongest, rotational piece for the Wildcats.
Right. And any national contender has to have those role players as well as the five-star recruits and the international stars. You have to have those role players that don't mind, I don't want to say doing the dirty work, but basically maybe having to defend the best players on the other side or being willing to pass up on a shot to maybe get a better shot, instill confidence in some of the younger guys, but by just showing them in tough situations, okay, I'm okay. This is the time when you pull up and you hit an 18-footer or a 20-footer, to kind of change the momentum of a game. You need players like that, and I think Henderson's a perfect example of that. I've heard I can't say I remember seeing Ramey doing anything amazing at Texas, but you read about him, and it's that kind of guy. He's that meat and potatoes kind of guy that's going to do what's asked of him, even if he's coming off the bench. It's good. He's going to do what's asked of him. He's going to give him solid minutes, and he's going to lend stability. So Arizona is just going to be fun.
Like I said, I think they are going to be my pick for the Pac 12 champions. I think it's going to happen. I really do. Moving on to team number two in our Pac 12 preview for 2022 and 23 here at Slasher U. And that's the team who many think are going to be the Pac 12 champions in this one. And it's hard to disagree with them, but I will. But not by much. Not by much. I think that they're going to be right in the running the entire time. And that's the UCLA Bruins. I think that this is one of those squads that, they lost some departures from a magical season. They finally got those, departures out of the way. They have some pretty decent key returners, but they have probably some of the most fun freshmen, I think, in the Pac 12. I think that's where, if we're going to put a storyline to every one of those teams, that's the storyline for me. When you ask, welcome them aboard, there's no transfers. This is a team that is a very high favorite, but not a single transfer coming into UCLA. But it revolves around some top five-star freshmen in Adam Bana and Amari Bailey. And, Bana is a five-star prospect, McDonald's All-American. I think he is going to be one of the most interesting players in all of Pac 12, not just for freshmen, all of Pac 12, period. A guy from Nigeria, he went to high school in California. Cronin says that, Mick Cronin, head coach of UCLA, said that he is a quick, athletic big man with the best motor he's ever seen as a recruit. That is pretty high praise from Mick Cronin. He is ever seen as a recruit. And I've heard other podcasts, other media sources saying if you haven't seen him play, you're missing out. This guy is absolutely electric. 6'9", 225 freshman. That's who I'm really paying attention to. Another one of these squads who lost a pretty decent team or decent amount of people to the NBA. One, two, three of them heading out to the NBA. One of them going to the Serbia League as well. So, that was a graduate, but you have plenty of people transferring or leaving out. And then obviously the other five-star, Amari Bailey. And I think he's going to be another one. He's going to be a headliner on this team for years to come. Number 10 overall prospect from 24/7 Sports. Another great quote from Cronin here said he's a relentless competitor. And that's something you absolutely need in guard play, Steve. And I know, look at that. I said guard play before you did on this show.
I'm so proud of you.
It's starting to, it's rubbing off.
You catch on fast. You catch on fast.
So with that being said, the freshmen are what I'm paying attention on UCLA, but I wouldn't be able to not talk about some of the key returners. With that being said, Tiger Campbell is a guy that I'm paying attention to. And the reason that I'm paying attention to him is because he's, again, one of the best guards and I think one of the most consistent guards, one of the most reliable guards, not just the Pac-12, but in the nation. And what I saw from him last season, if he can continue this on, I think they might put Arizona out of a top spot in the Pac-12. His three-point percentage went from 25% to 41% from the year before. If he can find a way to keep doing that, and continue and help that 3-point and let this team score points, they're in really good shape. I'm really excited for what I'm seeing from this UCLA team. AP number 8. I'm not the only one, as you can see. Coaches number 7. Torvik's got him number 9. And like I said, Ken Palm's got him second in the Pac-12, but they're right behind Arizona at number 11. So, I mean, it's that close. And I think that's exactly what we're going to see all season. It's going to be that close between these two squads. What's your thoughts on the Bruins?
Well, I'm glad you brought up Campbell. He's been all Pac-12 the last 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned his 3-point percentage going up. It's not only that more balls were going, hit the going through the net there. He's not hesitating. Sometimes guys, when they're taking that 3, and it's only a split second, but you can see that maybe they're not as confident shooting from that distance. For him, it's, off the bounce, boom, up, swish. That says a lot about a player who has that confidence in that shot. It's one thing to get better. I think players eventually do get better, unless you're Ben Simmons. You get better, shooting the ball. Campbell just last year, it was like watching a different player. Before, Campbell was always distribution, just tenacious defense. But last year, you knew that if he had his shot for a 3, boom, he didn't even hesitate to make that shot. Amari Bailey might be the most talked about UCLA recruit in what seems like forever.
I'd agree with that.
And UCLA has been through so much. I mean, even like with Mick Cronin, the COVID year, and there's been all kind of injuries. Jasquez, he played all year, but he wasn't the same guy. He literally hobbled through the NCAA tournament,
Mm-hmm.
and it affected his effectiveness from behind the 3-point arc. But, it seems if something could go wrong, it was going wrong for UCLA. Even their tournament draws, for a team that with that kind of quality, you would think that they would get a better break. And the committees just seem to just give them a bad draw. So UCLA absolutely has the talent. And the kid that you were talking about, Bona, not only was he from Nigeria originally, but again, he played internationally in Turkey before his family then came to the States. And now he's playing big time college basketball. Another guy, okay, he's, age wise, he's young, but experience wise, it's well beyond 99% of the freshmen, even the best McDonald All-American freshman coming in that you can have. So I think it's all going to boil that if Jasquez stays healthy,
Mm-hmm.
and he can kind of find his outside game again. And I really think it was more injury than anything else, especially with the ankle injury he had. That's tough to hit your jumper on a regular basis, because your body realizes that when you land after taking that jumper, you're going to have some pain. So eventually you don't even notice it's happening. It throws you off a little bit. So you have that. You've got Bailey. You have complementary talent up and down the roster. I think Cronin, like you said, I think Cronin's going to keep them in the conversation against Arizona all year long. I mean, we're both just so high on Arizona. That does not mean that UCLA is just an also ran. Okay,
No,
this
I'm
isn't.
also high on UCLA. I just
Yeah,
given this the inch to Arizona.
exactly, exactly. And that's the thing with the Pac-12. The more you look into it, and I just watched the media days interviews and in the previews yesterday. The Pac-12 is a lot deeper and a lot more competitive than people. I mean, everybody's talking Arizona, everybody's talking UCLA. You have some folks mentioning Oregon and USC, but not as enthusiastically as Arizona and UCLA. This conference, Washington State,
Mhm.
Colorado, there's a lot of teams in this conference. They're going to cause problems for any opponent, not only just in the conference, but we're playing out of conference as well. It's only going to make these teams better come conference tournament time and come NCAA tournament time. And I think you're going to see a lot more Pac-12 teams not only ranked throughout the year, you're going to see them go into the second weekend of the tournament.
To finish off my thoughts on UCLA, first of all, I think both UCLA and Arizona are going to be top 3 or 4 seeds in the tournament once comes March. Like I do think so high on both these teams. They have a pretty decent schedule for November. They do see Illinois in the main event. That's going to be a really interesting game around Thanksgiving time. And then they head into Pac 12 against Oregon, and we'll see them against Stanford early in December. And then the CBS Sports Classic against Kentucky right before a week before Christmas is going to be exciting. I'm really looking forward to that one. Speaking of Bona, you know, he's a big guy, 6'9". How is he going to do against some of these super seniors, right? We got a freshman who's supposed to take, the scoring capabilities down low. I think that there's honestly with UCLA, I think 1 through 4 will be able to handle the scoring if this doesn't work out for Bona initially right off the bat, if he has to have some growing pains. But we're in a scenario right now where we've really only seen it kind of last year, but where we're seeing freshmen against super seniors, 5th year, 6th year seniors, especially a guy coming back from, that should have went to the NBA draft like, Drew Time. I wonder
Mm.
how that'll affect Adam Bona and how that'll affect guys like that with their play, if they'll be able to, I don't necessarily want to say the word keep up, but be able to compete adequately against guys like that.
Well, I think too, Cronin's the kind of coach that's not going to let a kid lose confidence. I mean, if he has to scale back minutes, especially against I mean, there's going to be some teams in the Pac-12 specifically that are going to be big up front. So at 6'9", okay, maybe he might be out muscled, so maybe you cut back minutes against certain teams, but it doesn't mean you put him on the bench. I think Cronin's the kind of guy that knows how to pick and choose moments for his younger players. That's why I'm so excited to watch Bailey. Anytime UCLA is on, I'm going to watch the game live. I mean, I don't care how many pots of coffee I have to pour. I want to watch this kid because I just think it's going to be just fun to watch
Slasher
him develop.
Slasher Sports Twitter is about to be all over that hashtag Pac-12 after dark. I'm telling you what. And pots of coffee. I mean, you're over there drinking cold brew. Come on, you'll be all right. You're good. Just gotta set up that cold brew. Make sure it's good to go. All right, moving on to the third team here in our Pac-12 preview, and this one I've actually became really interested in this one when I started researching it and getting ready for this show, and that's the USC Trojans. First of all, Andy Enfield has been with this team for a decade now. That's wild. I
Yeah,
didn't expect that they've
yeah.
already be 10 years. It just right. I didn't expect that to happen. But when you look at the preseason rankings, they didn't make the AP top 25 or the coaches poll. Okay, understandable, get it. But the Torvik ranking 40th, Ken Palm 36. That's pretty decent. Okay, not bad, just outside. But you look at where that ranks them in the Pac-12. The Torvik ranking is 5th in the Pac-12. 5th. USC is 5th. And then for Ken Palm, they're 4th. So we're talking them as our third team right now. And not many people agree. I think this is going to be a really fun team. I'm looking forward to seeing what USC can do. I do think that this is a squad that really can do some work. I think that this is a squad that could be as low as 6. Don't get me wrong, but I could see them battling for that third spot. I do think that it's a 1-2 punch at the top between UCLA and Arizona, and then there is going to be a little bit of a drop. Nothing too crazy, but there is going to be a little bit of a drop. They had a very strong NCAA season last year, but I guess what you could say in this case, the reason why people are so low on USC or giving them maybe the benefit of being fifth or fourth in those rankings, because they're really only bringing back two significant guys in Drew Peterson and Boogie Ellis. What's your thoughts on USC?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Boogie Ellis,
Yeah, of
because when he
course.
transferred in from Memphis last year, it was apparent from the first tick of the clock that he was the leader. He was the guy that was going to be the heartbeat of this Trojan team. When you pair him up with a 6'9" guard, and LA in general has had a history of 6'9" guards. I'm not saying that he's Magic Johnson. I'm not going there. Okay. I'm not that crazy. I'm crazy, but I'm not that crazy. But Peterson, not only is he a matchup problem at 6'9" and a guard, but you can move him all around, even within a game. You can move him to the 3. You can move him to the 4. You know, he's a good rebounder. I think he led the team in assists last year. You know, I mean, he does everything. He's just so athletic, and he's so aware of what's going on the court around him. Right off the bat, that puts USC in every game. You know, and all of you out there are going to get sick of us throughout the year. It's more me than Christian saying guard play, guard play, guard play. But that's what you
No.
have to.
I said it
Yeah.
first on this show. I don't
Yes,
know.
but you really do have to watch that come tournament time. Conference tournaments, maybe even more important than in the NCAA tournament, but still, you have to have consistent scoring, consistent defense, not a whole lot of turnovers coming out of your backcourt if you want to have any kind of decent run in any tournament that you're in. I think what's going to make the Trojans tick, and I'm sure I'm going to mess up his name, and I even heard him pronounce it multiple times on the media day, and I'm still going to mess it up. But Vince Iwuchukwu, I think is how you pronounce it. He's a 5-star recruit. As he goes and as he develops, that's how far USC is going to go. You know, they've had to replace a lot of their front court players. If he can be consistent night in, night out, then USC is going to be consistent night in, night out, playing off of their guards, having some of the younger players come in. And it is amazing that Andy Enfield's been there for a decade. I was shocked at that too.
Right.
Maybe because every NCAA tournament, when they do like the little previews, you see Florida Gulf Coast and that amazing run that they had. You know, and I mean, I'm kind of he's a Pennsylvania guy, and this is my adopted state, so I kind of gravitate, to him and want to root for him. The great thing about Enfield is that not only did he have that Florida Gulf Coast run, he was an NBA assistant. He was with the Bucks for a couple of years. He had a nice run with the Celtics. When you're recruiting and trying to get people, whether it be through the transfer portal or trying to get these 4 and 5-star recruits, if you have a guy that knows what it takes to be successful in the NBA, that's a very underrated aspect. Usually you have that as your assistant, but to have that in your head coaching spot, a guy that's been, a successful assistant with some good NBA teams, these young kids are going to gravitate and they're going to listen to him because he can tell you not only this is how we're going to do to win this game, this is how we're going to get you so you can be successful to play, whether it be in the NBA or in the developmental league, or whether you're playing overseas. He knows how to turn you into a professional basketball player as well. And I think that's going to help USC continue to stay relevant. I don't know, because Arizona and UCLA are such traditional powers, if USC will ever be king of the roost in the Pac-12. But if let's say you're the third best team in the Pac-12, that's a pretty good line on your resume.
Yeah, I'm with you. I do think, if they can find a way to make it the third, then they're in good standing. Like I said, I think that UCLA and Arizona are probably going to be, 3-4 seeds in the NCAA tournament. If USC can find a way to be a nice, 5, 6, 7 seed, then you're doing pretty well as well. Looking at their schedule, they start their schedule out honestly pretty cake. Other than in really only one decently tough task in November against BYU, they really don't have anyone to bat an eye out until they take on Auburn a week before Christmas. There's a good chance that they could go almost to Christmas and be undefeated. I don't know if that happens, but there's a really good chance, or at least maybe a one loss if they lose to BYU at a neutral site. But this is a team that really could figure it out with what they have right off the bat without having too much of a worry. Like you just talked about Florida Gulf Coast. That's who they start off against on Monday the 7th. When you get into conference play, they have some fun conference play. Obviously, the way it's set up, I'm actually really excited to see how it goes. They don't see like teams like UCLA till the end of January. They don't see Arizona till the beginning of January, but they got them, almost back to back. Within a week. They're both one Thursday Arizona, the following Thursday UCLA. So they better be firing in all cylinders during that part of the month. So I feel like they're going to do pretty well in the Pac-12. I think most of their losses are going to come in conference. I think they have a really
Yes.
easy non-conference, but this should be one of those teams that we talk about at the end of the season, finding a really nice spot here in the NCAA tournament. All right, let's move on to team number 4. We're just cooking right along with our first 4 here before we get to our sleeper pick. And we're going to talk about the Oregon Ducks. And Dana Altman has got that team firing all cylinders. And you talked about it, Steve. You said that this team was a team that you paid attention to on a media day, and it got you excited about Oregon. Why don't you take the reins on this one and let me know?
Well, and I was a little skeptical, and a big shock for those of you that watch SlasherU things, that I'm skeptical about anything. But you heard a lot of, where they weren't even whispers, you heard a lot of hearty hype that the Ducks could be the team that wins the Pac-12 tournament, that develops through the year. They returned 3 starters, and I think that's really important. Will Richardson is not going to light up the scoreboard. Good scorer, but he's not going to be super flashy, but he's the kind of guy. It's good that he decided to come back. I think that brings stability. So having 3 starters to begin with, that is terrific. They have some JUCO transfers that played on, one played for the JUCO national champion, one played for the runner-up. They're going to bring size. They're going to bring defensive tenacity. So that's another element. Somebody that again has been there in big games. Okay, were they at the Pac-12 or the NCAA level? No, but some players go the JUCO route, whether it be for academic reasons or they had an injury in high school and they need to prove themselves, whatever it would be. That's why. And Dana Altman, more than the transfer portal, he likes to go the JUCO route. He and Bob Huggins probably do the best job bringing in junior college players that play key roles on teams, and they're guys. Okay, maybe they're not the upper echelon, but they fill those roles we talked about earlier. In this preview, Nafali Dante, he could be absolutely dominant if his knee is 100% healthy. Now, again, he had an ACL injury. He played pretty well last year, but I mean, I think there were times that, the knee started to bother him, but now you're another year away from that surgery. He could be absolutely dominant for Oregon. They've got a couple other younger kids, and again, I don't want to butcher their names, so I'm not going to embarrass myself or embarrass them by trying to pronounce their names. But these are big guys. I mean, across the front, they could have a couple of 7-footers and a guy that's 6'11". I mean, they're going to have a pretty intimidating, front court. I think Nate Biddle is going to be a name that people talk about. Not necessarily at the beginning of the year, but as the season plays on, you're going to hear more and more analysts talk about Nate Biddle and his development and him being a bigger force in games with Oregon. And Altman can flat out coach. He will be sure that for the returning players, they don't dwell on how the season ended for them. The season didn't really play out the way they wanted to at the end of the year. They went to the NIT, which is not a shameful thing, but for Oregon, I think there were a lot of high hopes for them last year that they could maybe get to a Sweet 16. That didn't transpire for them. So Altman's not going to let the returning players dwell on that. But that mixture of size and scoring options and having those three returning starters come back as a stability, and a maturing force for these younger players, that makes Oregon really dangerous. In the regular season, maybe not as much. But again, I mean, I think that if Dante and Biddle, Kalel Ware is the other kid I was thinking of. And, he's coming off of a U.S. under 18 gold medal performance, for the team that won the gold medal for the under 18 for the U.S. There's a lot of potential. Like we were talking about Arizona with the young players, they're going to just get better as the year goes on. That same thing is going to happen here with Oregon.
I mean, you talk about the JUCO guys, right? I mean, you can be skeptical all you want about the JUCO guys and can they perform at the next level, especially a level like the Pac-12. But I mean, let's just take Tyrone Williams, for example. He averaged 27 and a half points a game in JUCO. I mean, I don't care what level you're at. If you're averaging almost 30 points a game, you're pretty good. You're pretty good. So I feel like he's going to find a way to, I don't think he's going to have that kind of point average, but he's going to find a way to get pretty comfortable in this one. Unlike some of the other teams in the conference that we mentioned before, Oregon does not have an easy 2022 to get this season started. They start off pretty tough. We see them around Thanksgiving time taking on Houston, which we know Houston's going to be a fun team. And then we see them take on UConn. Then UCLA comes early. They come at the beginning of December. So I think that there's a chance that we could see them as a 3-4 loss team before the year's up. And it doesn't mean that they're going to be a bad team. I think that they're going to be right with USC. I think that we're going to see that their record, I wouldn't even be surprised if at the end of the season they were identical. Like that's how close. I mean, non-conference and conference. I think that their schedules are about the same kind of strength, especially obviously in conference, but non-conference play. Oregon's probably a little tougher because of the teams they play like Houston and Connecticut. But I think when all the dust settles, I wouldn't be surprised if USC and Oregon's schedules or records, I should say, are almost identical. So I like where this one's at. I do like your excitement around the Ducks because I do think that the excitement is deserved. What will be really exciting to me is when they do go through that little early gauntlet, if you will, and shock some of us. Maybe with a win or just really good play against Houston or a win against Connecticut. Then they got to take on Washington State and UCLA. I mean, that 4 games between the November 20th and December 4th. That's no walk in the park. Houston, UConn, Washington State, and UCLA. We're going to really find out what this Oregon team is before the year's even up. So they're going to be able to figure out what they need for Christmas, before this is all said and done. So.
Well, and that's done by design. You talked about Houston and UConn, 2 totally different types of teams. That's what you want early on when you're trying to work younger guys in or JUCO transfers in. You want them to have different looks, so that I think Oregon's going to be more dangerous in the Pac-12 tournament. And where that impact comes in, that then affects seeding potentially for a team like Arizona or UCLA, where maybe they're not going to get a 1 seed that they potentially could, or a 2 seed that could be in the running for because they lose their conference tournament. They might get bumped down to a 3, a 4, or a 5. I don't know if they get down to a 5, but I mean, that's where Oregon having those different looks early and those challenges early. They'll take it. Okay, fine. Okay, we have 3 losses going into January to the new year. Okay. But, we're going to play our butts off, and we're not going to roll over. We're not going to get blown out of the gym. We're going to make it. I don't even think they'll get blown out by Houston. I think it's going to be a competitive game right down to the final minutes. So that only makes your team more confident, that confident builds as the season goes on. You come into the tournament, a team like Oregon, they're so dangerous. They can go out in the first round, or they could win the Pac-12 tournament. And that's what, when I said my excitement, I think Arizona wins the regular season, but I can see Oregon winning the Pac-12 tournament just because of the way they're constructed. If all the pieces fall into place, and if those matchups in the front court can really take advantage of that for Oregon, I think that makes them a very dangerous team come March and April.
Ooh, all right. Okay. See, get me excited. Basketball season is only just a few days away, and I personally cannot wait. With that being said, Steve, let's dig into the last team we're going to talk about here at the Pac-12 preview, and that's our sleeper pick. And this is truly a sleeper. I know some of the sleeper picks that we've given you in our past previews may have still been in the AP Top 25, may have not been considered a sleeper, but to us, we do. This one's a sleeper. This one truly is, and that's the Colorado Buffaloes. We've seen in some other media and some other preseason polls that they have them as low as 10th finishing the Pac-12, as high as 6th, I think is the best. I think maybe I saw 1/5. This is a team that I think could really shock some people. I mean, Tad Boyle has done a really good job with this team. I think they can really shock some people. Their schedule is, in my mind, I think it is very in their favor. And I think that helps out a lot as well. I'm gonna let you dig into the specifics, and we'll talk about their schedule after. So take me through, because I know you're with me on this one. We discuss it when we talk about the preview. We agree on a sleeper together. So talk to me why you think Colorado is a sleeper in the Pac-12.
Well, first of all, you have to remember they finished 4th in the regular season in the Pac-12 last year. Again, I mean, they earned that, but I mean, a lot of things had to happen for that to happen. So really, to say Colorado is a sleeper, I mean, there's enough pieces that are going to be coming back. Maybe that you really shouldn't totally sleep on Colorado. They're bringing in 2 grad transfers from the Ivy League. Now, Colorado's not an Ivy League school, but with Gabadon from Yale and my guy Ethan Wright from Princeton, every time he had the ball in his hand, I would yell at my TV, shoot, because I just wanted him to take every time he had a shot, take it. I don't care how many you miss. He's just that kind. When he gets on a roll, he can carry a team, and he's exciting. But again, Ivy League is not the Pac-12, but these are guys that have already put 4 years into a program. That experience, especially early on, emanates throughout the roster. And you've heard that common thread throughout this preview, where the veteran returning players, Ellis was probably the one that I gushed about the most, makes a big difference. That calming influence. Even when the younger players make mistakes, you can say, hey, okay, you see what happened there? Yes. Or if they don't, you playfully shake them and say, hey, can't do that. Don't pick up that dumb foul. Don't force the shot. You pull up. You need to have that kind of veteran presence there. If they're going to go anywhere, though, it's going to be with defense. Colorado plays a totally different style of play than most teams do in the Pac-12. They are really reliant on shutdown defense, and they can't have any off nights, from a defensive standpoint. Otherwise, they'll be out of the conversation, not only for an NCAA tournament, but being at least in the upper echelon. That's where I can see where teams are saying, there's too much offensive talent in this conference now. Colorado can't get by on defense. Yeah, they can, because they proved it last year that they could. And it's almost like the tides are reversed. It's not like, well, Colorado's a football school now. Most recently, Colorado's been a better basketball program. And it's still a destination. They have a great coach.